Hi everyone, welcome to BC Poly Hot Stove. I'm Jordan Bateman, VP Communications for the Independent Contractors Business Association here in rainy Metro Town on day 3 of 77 straight days of rain that we're expecting.
Hi, I'm Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca, coming to you live from I guess it's drizzling outside here, the legislature. Victoria, we get less rain. I'm sorry.
Oh my God, the crocuses are getting wet. I can't believe it. All right.
Yeah, well, there are tennis games that are maybe getting canceled this afternoon. It's tough.
Oof, so tough. Now, Maclean, I woke up this morning. I was excited. Rob Shaw, who obviously we all read the first tweet of the morning. What's Rob Shaw saying? Says, been invited to the Premier's office. Cabinet shuffle appears likely. But this was not so much a shuffle as it was a one-for-one trade, essentially.
Yeah, it was a swap. Well, there was one promotion.
Okay.
Anne Kang, who was the parliamentary secretary for seniors, I believe,
That's right.
is now basically, she inherited Ginny Sims' old role, which had been Selena Robinson, who's doing municipal affairs and housing, which is a big ministry, had been handling that. This is kind of an admission that Ginny's not coming back.
Yeah.
When they didn't give her portfolio to a new minister at the time, it was they hoped it was a temporary suspension. She's gone now.
Yeah. She's not returning. One suspects. Do you know if they're going to change up the legislative seating plan at all? Because she still sits in the front benches, and Andrew Weaver still sits with the Green Caucus, and both of those should change.
Well, I don't know where you'd put Weaver. I mean, there's no room for him on what you'd call the opposition side. Those seats are all taken, and they're not changing. The only place to put Weaver is, currently he's between his two Green colleagues. He'll probably just move one to the end and sit at the very end. But so he'll swap with, I think that is Olsen at the end there. But he'll literally just move one seat over. And as for Anne Kang, I don't know that she even needs to move her seat.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well, a weird thing. And then, of course, Bruce Ralston and Michelle Mungal swap ministries. Mungal going from energy to jobs, etc. They've rebranded it. But then Ralston going from the old jobs portfolio to energy. Any scuttlebutt as to why?
No, nothing official. I don't think we'd need Horgan or any NDP source to kind of confirm that this has become their trickiest file.
Right.
And Ralston is arguably the steadiest hand they have. And it must have been, imagine being Michelle Mungal, who had been quite vocal about opposing a lot of the projects she's now responsible for, and then had just spent the weekend studiously avoiding Indigenous youth protesting her office here in Victoria. So, it's, in some respects, it's a move that makes some sense.
Yeah, she, the NDP obviously generally opposed Site C, but she was definitely one of the most vocal critics. Then she became responsible for it. I do wonder, there's been talk and some word out of BC Hydro that there's some overruns on Site C, that might be some cost escalations. I wonder if perhaps John Horgan wanted a firmer hand on the reins there.
Well, and that's entirely possible. Bruce Ralston, if you've known him, if you've ever seen him speak, it's he's about as steady as they come. He only has one facial expression, and it's serious.
Yep.
And so, he's probably, in all honesty, I think this is actually a smart move for the NDP. He might be the right person for that portfolio right now.
Yeah, I actually have a little bit of affection for Bruce Ralston. He is an anti-Senate person like I am, and showed up when back to Taxpayers Federation we had our giant balloon that looked like a certain Mike Duffy, allegedly. And then he also, we brought over once the head of the Danish Chamber of Commerce to talk about the evils of sugar tax, sat him down with Ralston, who's a finance critic. Ralston had a very intimate knowledge of all sorts of different European tax systems. I thought he had a good chance to become a finance minister, and I think he probably would have been a pretty smart one. So this is probably a better use of his skill set than just having him kind of waste away at ribbon cuttings for tech companies.
It's a pretty quiet ministry, that one, and you're right. It doesn't involve a lot of big news events and all that kind of thing. And they were probably happy to have an established politician there who didn't need to worry about building his reputation. But yeah, I think they badly need a steady hand at the till at that portfolio right now, because things have gotten ugly.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's talk about what was big news last week's. Verified veritable butt kicking of John Horgan, David Eby, Joseph Arve, and the NDP folks in the Supreme Court of Canada.
Yeah, I mean, it was as decisive as they come. There were reports that Harvey was kind of conceding defeat the day before. So negative were the judge's questions of him. I saw Bill Thielman tweet something to the effect that, Joseph Harvey is, I gather, a friend of his. I don't know that, but is a very good lawyer. But I mean, no one was going to win this case. I mean, it was just, they were arguing that the Constitution is wrong. That's just not I'm sorry, but this is explicitly spelled out as federal jurisdiction, and they were trying to argue that they had the ability to, okay, fine, you can build the pipelines, but we have the ability to regulate what flows in them, which is not the same thing as a veto. I mean, on the face of it, it's ridiculous. It's the kind of thing where you suspect the judges kind of looked at him and saying, really, like, do you want to go back and try again and then come back, or? Yeah.
No, it was nonsensical. They were drawing dead from the beginning. It's another, I think, black eye for Dave Eby, who's, as Attorney General, for a guy who the media used to call the crusading Attorney General, you notice the rhetoric around him has sort of died down. Everyone still thinks of him as the heir apparent to the leadership of the BC NDP, but I wouldn't bet on it. Anyways, it was an interesting case. It was flawed from the start. Rachel Notley, noted BC Liberal supporter Rachel Notley, former NDP Premier of Alberta, she was the first one to say this was stupid. And it turned out she was right.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, it would be hard to imagine a more cut and dried case than this. The Constitution explicitly sets out interprovincial infrastructure as federal. Mm-hmm. The province was saying, well, no, actually, it's provincial. Well, I'm sorry. That is not what it says. Yeah. This was the equivalent of arguing that the sky is red. Yeah.
And it was a waste of a couple $1 million, if not more. But, look, the problem for us is that this really came down to crass politics. This was about fulfilling the deal with the Green Party to use every tool in the toolkit to fight this thing. And, for John Horgan, who cares if he lost in court? He's happy. He's the premier of the province of British Columbia thanks to this. So that is the situation there.
Sometimes you play the backup quarterback just because the fans won't stop chanting for him. I think maybe that's the situation we had here. It's exactly it. Maybe they were content to spend a couple $1 million on what they knew, because they're not stupid, that this was a no hope legal court case because, well, they had to say they were trying.
Yeah, for sure. All right, kind of tying into the energy file, we have Swartz Bay was shut down, the ferry terminal, Monday morning at 7. By protesters, standing in solidarity with what they call the Wet'suwet'en, but which was probably better defined as 5 Unistoten hereditary chiefs, 3 of whom may actually not be official hereditary chiefs, given the way they treated the female ones, who they stripped the titles of. But whatever, they were out there, and this turned out to be a public relations disaster for the anti-pipeline crowd. It also came on the heels of 2 weeks of weather cancellations for BC ferries, where, as Jack Knox likes to joke, the Vancouver Island was cut off, the mainland was cut off from civilization by not being able to get back and forth to the island. But look, I think the most outrageous comments from a general political figure in BC came from Patty Backus, the former chair of the Vancouver School Board, who was just lauding this as a wonderful use of protesting, but really had no answers when the story started to come out about people missing appointments at Vancouver Hospital, at BC Children's Hospital, people missing employer interviews. This really did nothing to hurt the companies and did everything to hurt just average people who they're trying to win over.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's funny, they were protesting amongst probably the most supportive population base in the province, the southern Vancouver Island. But they've gone out of their way to alienate them. And the one thing you don't want to do is frustrate people when they are trying to get to things like appointments. I heard some people saying, well, what's the difference? I mean, last week it was weather delays, and this is no different. That is like saying that you should be just as upset if you slip and fall on a sidewalk and break your nose as if I punch you in the face and break your nose, because what's the difference? Of course you're going to be angry at the person who did it on purpose. We're all adults here. I mean, it's such a facile argument, but I'm so tired of hearing it. And we hear it whenever there's a protest like this. I think had they lined the highway, also illegally, mind you, but, lined it and weren't blocking traffic, they probably would have, received honks and thumbs up and waves and smiles and plaudits and all this kind of thing. and none of the opprobrium they've gotten for, making people sit in dark cars for they didn't know for how long.
Yeah.
As someone with a small child who, occasionally really has to pee or, decides he's very hungry or very thirsty, this is kind of a nightmare scenario. I
Yes.
mean, that's just, I am so glad that I wasn't waiting for a sailing that morning.
Oh, for sure. Like, it would have been you're right. And there's nothing outside the gates. Like, you have to walk a long way back. There's that one little pub hidden away in the marina down, but
which is not open for the 7 a.m. sailing.
No, of course not. So, come on, this was tough. You're right. This smacks of me what they did on Lionsgate or on the Ironworkers Memorial Bridge when anti-Kinder Morgan protesters hung from ropes there. I think that was a key turning point in public opinion against the protesters, where people were like, hey, like, why are you inconveniencing average people? This makes no sense anymore. And if you look now, pipeline support is higher than ever in British Columbia. So we'll see. I think the universal condemnation by the media and by most of the pundits and most politicians, except for Paddy Backus, will probably mean that these guys think twice before doing these sort of stunts again.
Yeah, don't plan around the Twitter bubble. It's not representative.
No, exactly. All right, Maclean, last Monday I woke up and read the Globe and Mail, and Justine Hunter has a piece in there hinting at a BC NDP deficit budget. What's going on?
Well, I mean, we've talked about this on this show and in the Orca before. The trend is very clear. I mean, we don't need to rehash the numbers again, but essentially the NDP, despite having raised some taxes and income, have gone from a surplus of, and I'm going to forget the number, I want to say 2.5 billion?
2.7.
2.7 billion, excuse me, down
to
149 million.
What's a couple hundred mil between friends?
And they still don't have a deal with the BCTF and all these other things, and the trend is just generally looking down. So we've been arguing that it looks like they probably will have to at least contemplate a deficit in the near future. One thing that's been interesting is you've seen some organizations like the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and I want to say Press Progress, but I'm not positive on that one, sort of floating some stories out there like, maybe it would be a good thing if they just embraced a deficit, which has worked federally.
It's just an error. What's really the difference between a few hundred million up and a few hundred million down?
Yeah, like, let's just give the BCTF, if we're going to have a deficit, let's just give the BCTF everything they want, and then it's done. And then who cares? These budgets balance themselves. Yeah. So it's been kind of interesting watching a few of these kind of trial balloons float out there and see if they take off, and I don't think they have. And it would take a pretty significant climb down for, Carol James has been saying for 3 years that she thinks having a balanced budget is like her main job.
Right. So
for her to admit, in the year before they're running for re-election and needing to gain seats to stay there, I still think that they're going to try and fight this tooth and nail. But the numbers are the numbers. It doesn't look great.
No, you're exactly right. So I'm not sure where they go from here. Look, the NDP, as we've talked about before, reputationally, they can't afford a deficit budget. They can't go into that next election trying to pin all the problems of the world onto the BC Liberals for the past 16 years. And at the same time, the BC Liberals can just say, well, at least we balanced the budget. At least we left you with a $2.7 billion surplus. At least taxes were, 5% or 8% lower or whatever it was. We left you in good shape and you blew it all and more. They cannot go into that election like that. Number one, Horgan, you're right, has made too many statements for balanced budgets. The last thing he wants to be is standing up there on a debate stage against Andrew Wilkinson, who will, no doubt remind him constantly of those mistakes. So it's an interesting thing. I think they're just the usual lefty trial balloons. The CCPA would run a massive deficit constantly if they just don't care. Borrow as much money as you want, and but they just have no grasp on reality. So I don't think that they're a great barometer for it. But it does, it was interesting because it was kind of floated out there, and the first ones to sort of jump on it were like BCTF teachers saying, "Yeah, do it. Let's get us the money." The problem is you can't just give the TF the money; you have to give it to all of the unions, and that will take your couple $100 million into a couple $1 billion really quick.
Well, that's it exactly. There is a Me Too clause, and the BCTF seems to think that they can just be exempt from it. But that's not going to happen. It's a bit like the Supreme Court case over again. I shouldn't have to explain to you that this clause will in fact apply to the people it is specifically supposed to apply to. You mentioned the NDP and their brand. They can't afford to blow this surplus into a deficit in 4 years. You're right. It reminds me of a probably apocryphal anecdote. I think it was Mackenzie King during an election campaign. Said something to the effect of, Tory times are tough times. And someone in the crowd yelled, "It's a coincidence." And his response was, "Maybe, but which coincidence would you rather have?" And I think the NDP would be kind of in that situation where they're going to be saying, yes, we have a deficit now, but there's all these mitigating circumstances. And people will just kind of say,
yeah,
this is exactly what we worried might happen.
Yeah, and enough of those circumstances you can trace back to NDP policies, right? Like, Gabby Wickstrom, God bless her, working hard in Port McNeill, correct? Port McNeill? Right?
Yes.
Yeah, working hard on behalf of the folks there who have been on strike for 8 months now. She's not. They do blame partly BC Liberal policies, but they also blame the raw stumpage fees and all the other things the NDP have done to really, crush the business. You have Ravi Kahlon's stupid remark that there were too many mills. This is why these people are losing their jobs. That doesn't help. So you have all the housing rules, which really choke the golden goose here in the Lower Mainland, especially. You have people who have lost equity in their homes. Maple Ridge, for example, down 10% in the value of their homes. That puts, a lot of those folks who came in with the bare minimum down payment, that puts them at risk of going underwater. But more importantly, it means when they refinance, they don't have extra money to do renovations or to buy the electric car that, Andrew Weaver told us to refinance our houses for. All of these things trace back to NDP policies and wind up costing them.
And you didn't mention the employer's health tax, which this week got slammed by, I don't know if you're familiar with Victoria, but the owners of the Fernwood Inn. And if you know Victoria, which is a left-leaning city, Fernwood is the left-leaningest district in the left-leaningest city in the province. Fernwood is the kind of place where it's not uncommon at all to see someone with like a hammer and sickle tattoo. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
I live adjacent to Fernwood, and it's a beautiful neighborhood. But yes,
Maclean, don't go in there. It doesn't sound safe.
They're very friendly.
Comrade, be careful.
But the owners of the local pub, which is a very good pub, were publicly saying, the employer's health tax is a big problem for them.
Yeah, and it actually put it on their bill. I'm not sure about their calculation on that bill, but it's more about making a political point, and I think they have. So that got a lot of stuff. Hey, I want to talk about, on the right side of the spectrum, an interesting email I got from Troy Lanigan, the president of the Manning Institute. And apparently, Preston Manning is retiring, and as he retires, he's taking his name with him. And the Manning Institute is now looking to rebrand, looking for a new name to kind of trigger going forward. The Manning Institute, used to host, does host every year the Manning Conference. This used to be like the nerd prom for conservatives across the country. It was the big event that you wanted to go to hobnob with the center right and people who had who were coming up with the big ideas. The problem was a little bit that Preston found himself at odds with a lot of those conservatives with his undying affection for carbon taxation. And, slowly the Manning Institute has sort of withered away. At one point they were training campaign managers and candidates and all sorts of things. And now they owned a beautiful building in Calgary. Now they're a shell of their former selves, but they're rebranding. And I would like to propose the Maclean K Institute.
Wow, that is a big swing and a miss. I think I'm not sure that would be.
How about Tory McTory Face Institute?
That's good. I like the Bateman Center myself.
Well,
there's a Bateman Center here in Victoria, which is very different.
Anyways, if you have a good idea for what the Manning Institute should rename themselves, send it on to the Manning Institute. They're looking for a new name. But it is we should say, like, Preston Manning, here's a guy who didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk.
He did.
When Western alienation was a problem, when he felt the Conservative Party, progressive conservatives were straying from conservative values, he formed his own party, got them to official opposition, then gave up his seat to help with the merger, made sure that conservative values were fought for. And he's a guy who, every Reform MP said they would not take a MP pension. There were only 3 who actually did not take an MP pension, and Preston Manning was one of those 3. It cost him literally millions of dollars in his retirement, but he was true to his word to the end. So, congratulations to Preston. I've met him a couple times. Always been so kind to me and very warm, welcoming guy. And excited to hear that he's getting to retire, and hope that he enjoys retirement and kicks back and maybe refreshes a bit and comes out with some big ideas for the next generation of Conservatives.
Absolutely, and I'll say two quick things about Preston Manning, who I think I've met once. Is that shortly after I was in federal Liberal circles around 2000, 2001, and I can tell you that they had a deep and abiding respect for Preston Manning. I mean, exactly the reasons you said. They felt that he was a man who had principles and stuck by them, and even if they disagreed, that's fine. But they saw him as somebody who was honest and forthright, and I think that is still how he is seen today. The other thing I'll say is, you compare some of the talk about Wexit. What was Preston Manning's slogan? The West wants in.
Yeah.
It was a very different tone. It was yes, we think we're getting an unfair treatment, but we want to come and sit at the big table. It wasn't threatening to leave. So it was a very different conversation that he wanted to have.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The West wants in, not the West wants out. That's that's an important thing. So yeah, more people like Preston Manning in public life, please, of all stripes. All right. Maclean, our hot politicians, our people. I got to give a shout out to a journalist. Actually, there were a number of them who worked on this story, but Bob Mackin from The Breaker, who saw 7 protesters holding signs, all
protesters.
Yeah, protesters, all of which happened to look like they were written with the same hand and with the same pen. Turns out those 7 protesters at the Meng Wanzhou trial demanding her release and support for Huawei. Turns out at least 2 of them were paid to be there. One got $100, one got $150. I will note the man got $150 and the woman got $100. So damn that pay equity gap again. This is offensive.
A 50% difference.
This is offensive on many different levels. But anyways, they were paid to be there. They looked pretty sheepish, and the reporters got to the bottom of it very quickly and discredited that little grassroots protest pretty quickly. Wow. So good job, Bob Mackin and journalists.
Yeah, he was the one who seemed to be first on it. It was kind of amazing that I've seen one of them one of the protesters give an interview where they said they actually thought that this was for like film, that they were basically filming a protest scene in a low budget TV show, and that they hadn't bothered to. I mean, it's one of those things that strains credulity, but I mean that's what's their.
There's nothing lower budget than local news.
If I'm one of these faux protesters, I think you got to lean into it, and you change your Twitter profile to be like, I'm not a protester, but I played one on TV. And
that's right. That's right. I'll protest anything. Just send me $150.
It's not a bad. I will get filmed holding up a sign with your cause.
Yeah, that's right. There's a market for that. They should actually sell pictures of themselves with a blank sign, and they could probably become a meme, right? Like we'll just write in anything. All right. We were talking Conservatives. That would have been a much better segue than the one that I just did. But who's your hot politician?
Oh, well, yes.
Or what's hot?
There's people who are feverishly speculating on the Conservative leadership race was going to be my hot. It's not a politician. I don't know how many times we need to see people trying to draft Ronna Ambrose on her behalf and her saying, no, thank you over and over and over again. The first time kind of seems like someone who thinks that they should be recruited, they shouldn't be the one stepping forward. And that's honestly what I thought at first, too, is that she wanted to be drafted in the same way that, funny to bring him up now, Jean Charest was drafted to become the federal liberal leader in Quebec. It's until people declare, it's kind of, well, we'll see. Who has declared? Who's official at this point?
Oh, yes. Well, Rick Peterson got in the race today.
Well,
Rick Peterson, who finished 12th out of 14 with 0.7% of the vote last time, a Vancouver businessman, and a very nice man. I've met him, but has never won election to anything anywhere ever. Couldn't even win the leadership of the BC Conservative Party, let alone the federal Conservative Party. So, not sure he's going to unite the clans here.
May not have the chops.
Yeah, may not have the chops. Well, we know Peter MacKay's in.
Yep.
He tweeted. We know who else is in.
Is Aaron O'Toole official?
He's calling around. He's in.
Yeah. Okay.
He may not be official, but he's in, judging by the people who he's calling, including some prominent social conservatives, which is an interesting thing.
Really?
My sense is he was not terribly socially conservative, but we'll see. I'm still holding out hope for Michelle Rempel, just because
me too.
I'd love to see a good fiery Twitter candidacy.
Well, and the Conservatives need to have at least one woman in the race. I think just for optics. And
right. There is a woman in the race. There is a woman in the race. What's her name?
Oh, really?
I'm sorry. I should know this, but It's terrible, isn't it? And I'm a conservative. I believe I'm a Conservative Party card holder, so I should be voting in this thing. I don't know.
I have missed it as well, so you're not alone. Okay. But I do actually. I think she'd be a good candidate. It's not just the fact that she's a woman, but well, you know as well as I do, they'd get crucified for having 6 men running for the leadership.
Yeah, no, for sure. They need to have some balance. And frankly, I think the women in caucus are a lot more talented than the men that I've seen so far. I mean, think of Michelle Rempel, Candice Bergen, Ronna Ambrose from the last caucus. Like those are Lisa Raitt from the last caucus.
You make a good point.
Like, if I was out there hiring for a job, I'd want to hire one of them before I'd want to hire some of these folks who are running. So there you go. That's what I think.
Fair enough.
Cold. Why don't you do the Human Rights Commissioner, and then we will end with my rant against Jody Vance.
Of course. This is speaking of things we talked about earlier in the show. I can't even help but laughing. BC's still fairly new Human Rights Commissioner Kasari Govender wade into the Coastal GasLink Wet'suwet'en issue, I guess last week, after the UN's Anti-Racism Committee issued a directive to stop major projects in British Columbia, including Trans Mountain, Coastal GasLink, and Site C. It emerged later, after Reuters tracked down the chair, that they had no idea that these projects had, First Nations benefit agreements, had secured, approval from indeed all of the First Nations.
Maclean, we're just a UN committee demanding you stop your interesting. We don't actually do research.
That's what I said. We don't have any investigating. This was an interesting new information, but they weren't changing their directive, and they had no interest in investigating because they don't have the capacity for that. Which it's probably true, but it does make Ms. Govender's tweet storm saying, we have to follow the UN's directive, and she supports their call. I don't know why she felt the need to rush in there. I'm not sure that this falls under the category of human rights, but obviously she disagrees.
Is the press gallery trying to get a hold of her? Like, is she going to do a walk back here? Like, she looks like a fool.
I will tell you because I have it on my phone here. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, she was on a flight to Eastern Canada yesterday and today, and was not able to talk. She did send a statement, which is very long, and so I will not read the whole thing. The benefit agreements may be new information to the committee chair. Nothing about this new knowledge changes the other important points. And again, it's pages that this goes on for. Human rights do not exist for the majority; they exist for each individual, and in the case of free, prior, informed consent for each Indigenous rights holding group. In other words, she goes on about they were wrong about not taking this into consideration, but nothing else has changed, and she does say she takes no position about the projects themselves, but won't change what she said. Well, which to me is a contradiction, but I mean, I'm talking about a statement, not an interview that took place.
Yes, that is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and eventually she's going to actually have to answer to the real reporters, and then you guys will dig into it a bit more. Human rights are individual, so every individual in Canada has to sign off on everything now? Is this what we're saying? Or you're trampling my human rights?
It's a strange bridge she's making, and in fact, what I should do is post her entire statement. As I say, it is quite lengthy, and so I risk, taking aspects of it and making it seem either better or worse. And I don't want to do that, to be fair to her. But I mean, it would take me.
Pixels are free, man. Post it all. Post it all so that I can.
It's quite long. I have to scroll, and you can see how small
post
the
it
text
so that I
is.
can kick the snot out of it and give me a break. This is.
Yeah, she does say she takes no position on the projects themselves, except insofar as they are required to uphold domestic and international human rights principles.
She backed their call to scrap them.
Exactly.
Great job, John Horgan. Way to reinstall this kind of stuff. That's perfect. Great. Well done, Premier. Well done. This is exactly the kind of stuff you should be. Give me a break. All right. Okay, so
speaking of ranting.
Okay, well, mandatory snow tires. Look, Maclean, it snowed here in the southwestern British Columbia for the once a year snowfall, if that nowadays. And it got everyone in a knot because, oh my God, ICBC crashes went up and claims went up, and people are driving out there with summer tires, and oh no, this is a horrible thing. And now you've got radio filling hours and hours of airtime, including my favorite, Jody Vance, who I absolutely adore, but is, you should not be feeling this, saying we should have mandatory snow tires for drivers. This is the way to go. And Dave Eby, maybe I'll consider it, as if he needs another reason to gouge drivers. Where the hell are drivers supposed to get all this money? Let's just stop for a second and think about this. Okay, the NDP get rid of the tolls on the Port Man. Big break for the people who use the Port Man. But 99% of drivers don't use the Port Man and saw absolutely no cost savings for that. I did, thank you very much. Most other drivers did not. Then you go to ICBC rates, which David Eby and John Horgan have ratcheted up. They were supposed to save safe drivers money. We've yet to find a safe driver who's saving any money. They've increased the rates. They've changed the class. They're gouging younger drivers. It is ridiculous and a massive cost increase. They've increased the gas taxes, despite the fact that they'd like to claim it's some sort of price gouging by the companies, which was proven to be utterly false by their own Utilities Commission report. They've raised gas taxes by $1.50 for TransLink. They've raised it by cent, 1.1, 1.2 cents per liter every year they've been in on the carbon tax. They are taking now 53, 54 cents per liter in gas taxes. Parking taxes have gone up because of TransLink. There is so much cost involved now to owning a car, and it's all part of this social engineering where they want us all out of cars and onto their beloved public transit. But that's not practical for a lot of folks out there. So now we're going to enforce people to buy expensive snow tires. There are people who are barely holding on, and it's really easy to sit in your ivory tower, making your $150,000 a year as the Attorney General of this province, and be able to say, everyone should have snow tires, and if you can't afford snow tires, you shouldn't be driving. People can't afford to live in this province anymore. Affordability has been the number one issue declared time after time after time. I used to lecture the BC Liberals about this. I'm lecturing the NDP now about it. You cannot continue to gouge people like this. And at some point, folks are going to be broken, the economy is going to tank, and no one's going to be able to afford all of your stupid rules. I'm about to go and meet for lunch with Technical Safety British Columbia. This is unrelated to snow tires. They're very nice people, I'm sure, who have the safety of our technical stuff in mind. I don't know. But they've come up with so many permits, so many audits, and so much red tape for companies to jump through that they are actually undermining their own safety issues, like the things that they want to have, the outcomes. If you charge people $300, $400, $500 for a permit for something as simple as changing a light switch, or moving a light switch from here to there, or making sure that your fire alarm pole is going, it stops people from doing that work, and it actually corrodes the safety. So government, you got to smarten up. You got to take a step back and say, look, affordability is the number one issue. Everything should be through the prism of affordability. Forget the prisms that you're using. The equity stuff, the prism should be affordability. Can folks afford this? They can't afford it. They can't afford mandatory snow tires for a few days a year that they may need it. You're better off asking people to stay at home. I understand there's going to be costs in ICBC claims, but guess what? You're passing those all on to drivers anyways. So, you've changed the whole system to do this. Sense BC has some interesting stats anyways, so it's all overblown. And they certainly have no dog in that fight. That's not their primary issue, but they, question the stats that are being put out by the media and ICBC. Come on, I'm just so fed up of talking about affordability, and then all we ever do is find ways to make life more expensive here.
Well, you know what? You're exactly right. And it's not just the cost of the tires themselves. It's taking them on and off twice a year. And, of course, guessing right on when the snow will come. Yep. The other thing that drives, I am unlike you in that I live in a condo. And I have a car. And there's nowhere for me to put snow tires. I cannot do it. We do have storage lockers, but they're very small. We can literally fit, Christmas decorations and like a box of keepsakes, and that's kind of it. There simply isn't room for snow tires.
What about under your kid's bed? You just lift the bed.
That actually would be the only place. Like you're joking, but there's no other options. Our pantry's full. I have a parking spot, but we are specifically prohibited from storing things like tires there. So, I mean, I don't think I'm all that abnormal for people in Greater Victoria and Metro Vancouver. In fact, in the fact that I live in an apartment or condo, and that like I would love to have snow tires that I could just sort of keep there and switch on and off myself, but I physically can't. And I'm not being difficult about it, but I don't have the space, and I am specifically prohibited from keeping a stack of tires in my parking stall. So, I mean, I saw that this got discussed on Twitter and just hand waved away, oh, keep it in your storage locker. I don't have one.
Yeah.
I would love to have one. I shouldn't have to move so that I could have snow tires.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just like the nanny statism. Like I don't go there all the time. I'm not always like reflexive, like, oh, everything, it's all the nanny state and government wanting, to have more power and control and baby us and all that. That is not my natural, like, usually I see this more as good intentions gone wrong. Yeah. This is just stupid. Like, enough is enough. It doesn't snow here enough to have to legislate this stuff. You've legislated it for people going on highways out of town. Okay, I don't even necessarily agree with that. Like, kind of like if you're dumb enough to do it, like, that's on you. But I've had enough. I had enough. I couldn't take Twitter like last week with all this talk of snow tires. I know you got to fill it with the airtime with something, and certainly politics had ground to a halt and business had ground to a halt. But it was just 2 days. Give me a break. If I knock it off, it's crazy. So there you go. Yeah. And clearly, I'm not in the pocket of Big Tire.
He's not. Big Rubber has nothing on you.
Big Rubber has nothing on me. That's right. So there you go. That was my rant. And hopefully we just kind of let this go and go on to the next fake controversy, whether it be expensive donuts for Justin Trudeau, which is another stupid thing I don't want to ever talk about again.
We're not talking about that.
Or Megxit, which I'm also tired of, even though I love them. I'm tired of Megxit. I'm tired of, at least we don't talk about this friggin' beard anymore of Justin Trudeau.
Sure. That's true. And let's never talk about the donut thing again. That was the worst thing. That was everything that was wrong.
I don't know anyone. I don't know anyone who was real, like any real person who was talking about donuts.
No, that's the thing. It was like 10 randos on Twitter, and it became a thing that the media felt they had to comment on. And now it's blossomed into think pieces, which is worse.
Yeah.
It's no one cares. And honestly, this is the kind of thing I don't like to say very often. I kind of think less of people who do really care about this because. Really? Let the man eat expensive donuts if that's the problem. I just don't see what the problem is. I like artisanal donuts too.
Charles Adler had like a whole segment on it, and he's like, "Oh, 3 things. Remember, I support mom and pops. Tim Hortons is not the same as being Canadian." Charles, shut up about it. You're the one. You're empowering this nonsense. We don't care. If we don't care, we shouldn't talk about it. Don't tweet. Just eye roll emoji at most, and let's move on.
Yeah. Done. Agreed. That's the last Donut Gate content you will ever see on this platform, right there.
Politics, this is the worst. Like, we are in the worst timeline right now. Like, this is just...
It might be true.
We have a whole year of this still to go, Maclean. Like,
We're about a year away from someone getting angry at John Horgan for preferring dark beer over lagers. I mean, it's going to happen.
Or he's a monster.
Andrew Wilkinson's going to choose not to wear a tie at a debate, and they'll be angry. Well, who does he think he's kidding? I'm like, he hates tie. I mean, just, really?
I don't know. Wilkinson, I think Wilkinson was born in a tie, so he just came out with like the little. It's possible. All right, that's it for us. Send your contributions to our therapy, care of Jordan at icba.ca. I feel better though after ranting about a few of these things.
That's good. I think he's off your chest, and I eagerly anticipate Jody's response on Friday morning.
Oh, I'm sure she's got plenty of room for her tires in beautiful downtown Kitsilano. It's like no problems at all. No problems at all. She's probably got a separate room for it near her butler. With the tires can sleep with my butler.
She was gonna be gentle, and now she's not.
I'm just kidding. I adore Jody. She's my favorite. Sorry, _. But she's the greatest. But sometimes I'm just like, what? No, come on, enough. Stop having government tell me what to do. I will say this though: when it comes to nanny statism, I do support making the colors of all 4-liter milk jugs the same for 2% and skim, because sometimes Dairyland is pink for 2% and blue for skim, but then some others reverse it. And for those of us who just grab the milk quickly, it can be a problem.
As a lactose intolerant person, this is something I was not even aware of.
Yes, well, Lucerne screws me up sometimes, and Island Farms. So I'm just saying, if you're going to have nanny statism, let's start with milk cap colors. And yes, I'm a complete hypocrite.
That sounds reasonable to me.
All right. The Orca BC on Twitter, facebook.com/theorcabc. He's at Maclean K. I'm at Jordan Bateman. And we're signing off. And always remember, folks, Joel Otto kicked it in 1989.
No such thing.
He did.